Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 30 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I kind of apologize for not having intro music and all the sexiness. We've got a new marketing leadership over at XenTegra, and we'll probably start adding some of that back. But to be honest, I like podcasts where they just get to it and there's not a lot of advertising and things going on to distract you away from the main topic. Chris, what do you think?
I kind of was thinking we might want to have a little intro, but I'm okay with getting right after it. I think it depends on how my day looks, but I could go either way with it. No advertisements needed here, other than XenTegra's awesome, and so is IGEL. So, right, let's go with that.
Yeah. Well, I think what'll happen is post-production crew will start maybe adding a little bit of nicety.
What we should do is each person should have their own walk-on music, like when batter goes up to bat, right? You have your own walk-on tune, something like that. That would be kind of neat. But
okay, now you're going the opposite of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh man, sorry. I was thinking, I'm thinking about that AAA baseball game later this week that we're going to be at together. So anyway,
Seb, you coming? We got a baseball game here in Charlotte. You going to come?
Yeah, fly over. Well, I'd love to have you in Charlotte. Downtown Charlotte is beautiful.
I will put on my expenses. I would say that Andy is paying.
I'll pay for it. You make it happen. I'll pay for it.
As long as you get that LinkedIn post, LinkedIn profile built.
Yeah. How's that LinkedIn profile coming?
I'm building one for you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Chris. I really appreciate it.
It's almost like he can't hear us or something.
Right.
Seb, how's it going? You and I were chit-chatting a little bit about the pandemic in Germany. Sounds like you guys don't have a lot of restrictions going on right now. It's great.
Yes, exactly. So at the moment, we just have restrictions regarding the distance between people in closed rooms, like in the supermarket, where we have to wear some masks. But besides that, at the moment, we don't have really restrictions. And just because you asked, Andy, the vaccine is at the moment rate about 61% of the German people are vaccinated. So we are a little bit over average in Europe.
Yeah. So what if I were to say social distancing and keeping your distance and all the great things that are unfortunately part of the pandemic? What if I were to say that's perfect for IT guys?
That's right. In distance, staying at home, doing geeky stuff in some basements.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I agree.
It's funny because, we're doing this podcast. You're an outgoing person for an IT guy. Chris is an outgoing person for an IT guy. I like to think I'm outgoing for an IT guy. My wife, she interacts with the community and a lot of people at my kids' school are like, yeah, Mrs. Whiteside, she's very nice, but Mr. Whiteside, he doesn't say much. I'm like, I'm an IT guy. What do you want from me? Yeah.
He's got a lot on his plate.
I do have a lot on my plate. All right. We picked a topic, an extremely awesome topic. It's one of the Tech Tuesdays, I think, videos that you guys recently released, and we're gonna talk about the video and what's covered there. Let me share my screen here. I don't know why I didn't do that already.
Yeah. While you're pulling that up, I was just going to say, for those that have gone through maybe training certification, I mean, like anything, you have to keep your knowledge up and running. And so what Seb and the community team have done here has been fantastic, right? These are a lot of like FAQ kind of things, right? Or I've noticed this, and is it me, or is it maybe I just you're not going to run into every situation all the time, and so putting together these types of things have been great. So I definitely, we try to basically, once these go live, we'll put links to these in IGEL Academy if you choose to go there and watch it, or go straight to this website, whatever. We just want to make sure that the information is there. You can, do it. So triple thumbs up here for Seb and putting these things together. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
I talk to other vendors all the time, and they're asking me, I'm challenging them on helping to build a community. I might just go look at what IGEL's doing. That's all you got to do. Go look at what IGEL's doing. It's good content. It's good people. It's not, I'm going to double down on the good people conversation. There's no arrogance. Doug for all of his history and background is a super humble guy. Seb's been super humble and great to work with. That's what you want, and what you build your community around.
That's definitely the best part, that it's not only IGEL employees answering questions, it's just people around the world coming from different businesses, different countries, different cultures, helping each other. And that's definitely something which is warming my heart, because that's something we were expecting, but we were wishing. And it happened through a lot of circumstances, maybe also some luck, definitely. So we're really happy to have all that members who are doing an extremely amazing job, more than we would have ever done alone.
Well, I think it starts with people and personalities. And to be frank, the end user compute side of the IT business has always been one that was a little more forgiving and a little more open than maybe the infrastructure side, because we all are wired slightly different than your normal infrastructure, database, networking guy. We actually, know that we have to involve and appreciate working with end users, and sometimes that makes us different to start with.
Definitely, especially last year, I would say, in the beginning of this year. So a lot of things change in our mindset too, through the pandemic situation, through the teleworker, spontaneous movements. And that's definitely something where I would say now the end user is having an even more important role in the company, because now it's not only just an office place, but really a human moving from one workspace to another.
Yeah. Yeah, our job is to enable that end user, no matter how difficult or hard they are to work with, no matter what the challenge is. That's our job, and that's it. That's all we do in IT. No matter who you are, the biggest hardcore database administrator, his job is to make sure end users can do their job with applications that enable them to do their job better. That's it. That's all IT is. And watching over security these days is a big part of that too. All right. The topic from September 9th of this year is how to check if IGEL UMS profiles are being applied. If I'm a Windows guy, right, I'm doing a RSOP, or I'm doing some type of GP update thing, and looking at either the UI or the CLI to see what profiles, policies in Windows world, in IGEL world, we call them profiles. What's being applied, what's being denied, what's erroring out. I think that's what you guys are covering here, right, Seb?
Yes, exactly. We have, let's say, the standard, what you already told at the beginning. The topics we're covering in the Tech Tip Tuesday videos are topics that we are seeing in the Agile community as being not answered maybe enough, or maybe not clear enough in some documentations, or maybe sometimes just have to see it instead of reading it. And especially that UMS settings not hitting the device or not getting retrieved from the device is something which is still there, even if there is not so much issue possibilities as soon as you have a running system. But one thing I want to mention, because it's one of the biggest mistakes that you can do, because it's not extremely clear, I guess. If you assign a configuration, because we are expecting that you are using the Universal Management Suite, so the UMS, for deploying configurations to your endpoint. You can still configure it locally, but that's another topic, but we are expecting that you're using our central management suite. And one thing, even if you're not already in the topic, I just want to mention, because I did it in the video, I cannot repeat it enough. If you assign a session to your endpoint, and usually everything is working fine, but this device is not getting your session, don't waste your time in checking network, etc., even if it might be a reason. Please check first if the device is having a Workspace Edition license or a starter license, because the logic from IGEL is, if the device has no license, you will still be able to manage the endpoint, but you will not be able to start a session. And that's just a small piece of knowledge that I want to spread. It's really common since years now that you have a license on the endpoint, or maybe a starter license assigned by your first run wizard. But if not, if no Workspace Edition, no starter license available, no session will hit the device or will be able to be configured locally.
I was going to mention that's a great point. Troubleshooting, right? Check your licensing, right? Because the licenses, when we went to version 11, they do expire. If you've been on IGEL for a while, version 10, they didn't technically do that. Now they do. The other thing I was going to mention, if you talk about this later on, I apologize, but when you're building a profile, there's an override session settings, which is, honestly, I'm 3+ years in, and I've never gotten a full explanation. But all I know is that if that is somehow turned on, it can really mess things up. And I've seen it where like they just kind of overlooked it, or maybe somebody checked it by accident, and you're not seeing like, why is it not picking up this setting? What's going on? So that's something to also kind of look for. It's kind of one of those, I'm trying to pull up a profile now to kind of, guide you to it. But I would say, unless you're being told to turn that on, don't do it. And maybe we could later on talk about a use case where that would be needed, but that's another thing that might be useful when troubleshooting. So
definitely. The only use case I'm seeing there, that's, by the way, a really good discussion, because I was thinking the same, and I just found one specific use case where it might make sense to have this override session activated, but it's just only one in my opinion. I had this request, I don't know, 1 or 2 weeks ago in the community, hey, we have users where we configured by the local support or the local feed service a terminal session. So on the accessories terminal, you can add to your endpoint an Xterm session to do some command line interactions. And if you would like to remove all that local session from an endpoint because you just forgot to delete them or whatever reason, the only way that you can do that without having to scripting something would be to use an override session, but only if you're using just one session type. That's absolutely right. If you're doing, let's say, one ADP and one Citrix, I would try to avoid that setting forever.
Yeah.
We did not cover that in that tutorial, I guess, but we had that, let's say, use UMS profiles like a pro, which is another Tech Tip Tuesday where we covered that. And this small expert mode is really, interesting piece of historical configuration change mode of IGEL.
So do we touch on, okay, is there any benefit in talking about the fact that we have UMS-based profiles and we also have local profiles? I think you mentioned a minute ago, this is all about pushing through UMS. If you're doing local profile settings just for maybe test or maybe a very one-off scenario, you just set it and forget it, it's going to apply if you did it locally. Is that true? As long as you're licensed?
Yes and no. So if we go through the priority of settings, we have the local in the IGEL setup configured settings and session profiles, which is, let's say, the lowest priority of setting that you can make. Mm-hmm. As soon as you have an additional level, like the management suite, which is the, let's say, most common use case, if you would have a conquering feature set or profile, you would override the local configuration because it's a higher priority. And then the last one, which is really the highest one, which is quite rarely used, but it makes sense in specific use cases, is to use master profiles, which will override any kind of profile as soon as it hits the same configuration set and overwrite it and just be available for the administrator group. But basically, the local one is really the lowest configuration step possible.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask a question real quick. So 10 years ago-ish, I'm listening to a webinar, and Brian Madden is just railing against Microsoft because they invented the registry, right? Where you take these settings and they apply at the registry, and that was potentially a security concern and a configuration concern. You guys don't do it that way, right? There's no registry, or is there some type of registry behind the scenes where all these settings are going?
I would call it the same because it's definitely an homonym. We call it registry 2. Okay. And it's not exactly the same because we are not speaking about the same architecture, but we have a registry. The registry is the setup.default, which is, let's say, the basic configuration set of everything which is available in IGEL OS from the profile side. Okay. So we have something like that, but it's not such complicated like on Microsoft, in my opinion, where you have to load some user hives if you want to apply it for a specific user. That's something that you are not obliged to do on IGEL OS. You have most of our settings in the graphical user interface, so basically what we would call the control panel in former times in Windows. Yep. And then you have the hidden part of the iceberg, which is just not shown because not every user is needing it. And yes, that's a kind of registry, but it's not exactly the same behavior.
Yeah. Well, and while Brian was talking about that in the webinar, I'm sitting there going, well, if you didn't have a registry, then you were just left with INI files, that wouldn't be powerful enough. So, even though I'm talking about Brian, who's a great resource, complaining about the registry at the same time. I was like, well, how else would you do it then? And I guess that's a situation IGEL found itself in. We got to have some central thing, something that can be configured on the fly, managed centrally, but also local, the registry, right?
Yeah, well, I look at several things, right? I mean, it's certainly a debatable topic, but for me, I've looked at various types of operating systems out there. How does our competitors do it, right? In many cases, but if you're taking Windows, right? I mean, when I came and started looking under the hood for IGEL, if you're familiar with Windows, then IGEL's registry ain't all that really different. You just kind of figure out where things are, but what's nice is, a lot of the features are based in the GUI, right? Checkbox here that ties into registry setting, but it also gives the developers flexibility. If we come out with a new feature that we can't quite get the UI built out for it yet, or haven't decided on what it's actually going to say, you can put that into the registry and then just make note of it. And when you look at our release notes, it'll point out exactly where it resides. So it's there as a nice, especially if you're maybe, developing a new feature, you're kind of still working on some stuff. You try this out, check this here, and then, when it's ready. So, and obviously, we want folks that are familiar, maybe a lot of the administrators for end user OS is Windows based. The registry with IGEL is not all that different. So I think that the learning curve is lessened, I think, by having similarity.
Well, I'll never forget the first time I couldn't find a setting, and Jeff Kalberg says, well, just go here. That was the registry. I did a search for registry and used the keyword, boop, there came that setting. And I never, for years, I never even knew where the UI setting was.
Yeah. And they have that, especially in a profile from the UMS, you can filter out stuff that's not turned on, so you don't get lost in the registry. If Windows has that same filter, I'm not aware of it. Maybe I just ignored it for years.
But you have to know all the different keys to get in to look for those.
Yeah, things. IGEL, it's pretty straightforward. Check this box, and there you go.
And just in case not knowing where to access the registry, because we are speaking about a feature which is part of the profile, just wanted to mention for the listeners, if you open a profile of the local configuration of an endpoint, you go to System and Registry, and there you see all that feature set as we are speaking about. And just a small hint, it's covered in another Tech Tip Tuesday video on the UMS profiles like a pro. But if you are in your profile and you are not knowing where to look at in the registry, besides the search function in the registry itself, you can also press Control F2, which will switch from the graphical user interface into the registry mode. So you will see in which part of the ICA section, like an example, you would find the configuration that you are seeing in the graphical user interface. So Control F2 in a profile, in the position of your configuration that you would like to look at in the registry, and that will show you the content from the registry where it targets the setting.
I know it's not part of this topic. One thing, if you're sort of checking profiles, is you can do the comparison. Not many people, I'm not sure if they're aware, but you can pick a profile and have it compared. And we've got a tool that helps you sort of side by side it and see like, well, what's different between this and that? And some, oftentimes there's a really cool thing where you can check and say, all right, what's the same, what's different? And it does a similar thing with filtering the registry. It points out like, all right, well, this is slightly different URL for that Citrix thing, or maybe it's something else. So if you're not familiar with that, that's pretty cool. And what's even better is that if you want to dial right into that setting, you can just double click on it and go to that, and it takes you right where you need to go. So
guys, we got started a little late. That was my fault. I had a call on the way in to work, and I was driving a convertible, so I had to pull over and take that call from a very important person at Citrix. Seb, let's walk you through what's in the video. Sure. Add as much content as you want, and Chris and I will interrupt you from time to time. But I think we have about 20 minutes left based on our schedules. Okay, perfect. Then I will go through. So we already covered basically what we spoke to. So we have a UMS, we have a management suite. In this management suite, we have profiles, which are basically configuration sets that you want to deploy to your endpoint. So now at the moment where you assign that profile to an endpoint, you have different possibilities to apply it. You can say it now or next reboot.
That's it. But let's say on the now feature. So you're deploying a feature and you want to see if the configuration is hitting the device. One first thing I would like to mention, because it's not that often known, but you have in the bottom part of your UMS console. So in that case, I'm speaking about the standard UMS console, not the web app. You have a messages ribbon, which is a kind of small piece of line at the bottom of your UMS console that you can expand with an expand button on the right bottom part of that toolbar, and that will show you the actual status of the last comment that you as a user sent out to the endpoint. Basically, if it's green, it's working, great. If it's in the red, then it's something that you would like to double click and check if something is popping up there. And you might already see there is, let's say, a network issue or something like that. So that's just a small thing which is called the status bar. I'm not sure if there is a real name for it, but it's just the messages bar. So if you see at the bottom of your UMS console an expand button, please click on it. You will see now a general status of the last comment that you send out to the endpoint.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just in case, basically, if you send out a comment to the endpoint, you will get a first response in a pop-up window. So it will see if it's result okay or not, and that's basically what the status bar of commands will show up. If you have decided to send out the configuration to the next reboot, so let's assume the endpoint is offline for the moment because the user is not in the office, is on vacation or whatever. And after 2 weeks, the device will boot up, the device will retrieve all the last configurations that he didn't have the last time he booted up from the UMS. So in the meantime, where the device is not booted up, you will see in the UMS little blue exclamation mark, which is sometimes defined as an I, but it's really an exclamation mark, which shows you just in, I guess it was on the bottom right of your device symbol, will show you that this device is not having the last state of configuration that you might have assigned. It's not a bad thing. It just means that the device maybe wasn't booted up since the last time or didn't have an ICG connection to retrieve that configuration. But that's something that you might want also to check on a wider range, because for that specific feature, you would have in the, let's say, former times, would have to go through every folder and check where a configuration didn't hit the device. So before going that far, just wanting to share you a small little information that this status can be now shown in a view with the last configuration is pending, but that's a topic we'll cover a little bit later on. But just as a reminder, a blue exclamation mark doesn't mean something bad. It just means that the device didn't have the chance to retrieve the last configuration state.
Okay.
So if you want to check that and especially see what the last configuration the device really hit it and gave back into the UMS database, I'm always doing the following. Before going on the endpoint itself, I'm opening with a right click on the endpoint in the UMS, the edit configuration. In that edit configuration, you will open the last configuration stored in the database for that device. And if you go through that, you will see that you have some white color or blue color. And blue means that for this specific configuration, a profile was assigned to that endpoint. As soon as you see that, you can be pretty sure that if you go to that configuration, so I don't know, assuming you set your language for your keyboard layout, you will be under user interface and then see your input settings, and then you will see that this configuration is blocked by a lock symbol, which means in our language that a profile was hitting the device with that configuration set. So it cannot be changed locally anymore. Mm-hmm. Just one small piece of information on that one, because even if it's part of our courses in the IcePack and the LMS, if you go with your mouse on that lock symbol and just leave it there, it will just show a little pop-up showing which profile is changing their settings. So if you have, I don't know, 100 profiles sent to the endpoint, even if that doesn't make sense everywhere, you will have the situation where you're not sure which profile is really hitting the device. If you just go with the mouse to the log symbol in your device configuration in the UMS, leave it there, and you will see overwritten by, and then you will see the name of the profile you are looking for.
Okay, and that'll tell you the profile that won and made the final overriding of that specific setting.
Yes, exactly.
That's great.
So just a small hint, but it can, not saving lives, it would be a little bit too harsh, but it will definitely save you some gray hair, I guess.
Seb, you never know. Somebody could be using a thin client connecting to a SAS or VDI or whatever session from an emergency room. There are situations where this stuff has been life impacting. And quick way to probably don't need to go there, but this is, it happens.
Yeah. Just to close the discussion I started on the on that log symbol, the only thing that you cannot expect, even if it's sad, but if you open the local IGEL setup, so the local configuration tool on the IGEL OS operating platform, you will have exactly the same situation, but you will not have the color, which is showing blue or white, and you will not have the ability to see, if you mouse hover over your log, which profile is overwriting that specific setting. That's the reason why I'm just sending you, you will see that the profile setting is the device, but you will not see which one. So if you want to make that, let's say, more deeply and more exhaustive, move to the UMS console and do it there, because there you will get more insights.
That's good. I'm glad you said that. I was actually going to ask specifically that question. Okay, so next section on here says what, when, who assigned it.
Yeah.
UMS oriented, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, it's I guess something like maybe Franglish or maybe Denglish, because I was wanting to say we have so much different possibilities to assign a setting to the endpoint that you want to have some logging about who did what when in your UMS. And that specific setting is related to a feature which is not activated by default, that we already covered in another podcast together with you, at the messages and logging feature inside of the UMS. So just sharing that one quite quickly, if you go to UMS administration, logging, there you have the ability to activate a specific, I would call it audit mechanism inside of the UMS, which will do a protocol about who did what in the UMS. There are some house cleaning jobs to achieve there. So just in case if you want to activate that feature, please do me a favor and listen to the other podcast or to the Tech Tip Tuesday video on our website, because it can increase your database size quite quickly. So just be careful with that feature, but it's extremely helpful. Coming back to the topic of the profile and what, when, who assigned it. If you open the log messages, so if you right-click on your endpoint and go to logging messages, you will have a window where you can filter for a specific date, time, user, and which kind of object, if I remember right, is concerned. So basically, as soon as you assign a profile to the endpoint, it will be protocolated there. So let's assume so Sebastian is assigning a profile user interface language DE for Germany to my endpoint. And then we would like to know, as you, Andy or Chris, hey, who did that profile and who assigned it when? Use the log messages, because it will definitely tell you if you didn't activate the data privacy feature that the administrator user is not logged in, then you would just see when it happened, but you wouldn't see who. But if you activated that little checkbox that you want to log also the administrator user who did that action, you will also see who did that, even if it's an Active Directory login user.
Well, I was going to ask that question. So I'm sure you guys in general recommend Active Directory-based user admins, but you can also use local users. It doesn't matter. Either way, you're going to see a log that says who did it. As long as you're not using the same account for everybody, you're going to have
right. Exactly.
Which I'm sure you two guys see it all the time. People use one single user account for UMS, which is a very bad practice.
It's I would not call it definitely a bad practice, but it would not be or a best one. Definitely not. Especially if you think about the super user. The super user is usually having all the rights. So is also having the right to edit the database, is having the right to change web dev component, change write and access list inside of the UMS. So that's definitely not a user I would like to share with everyone. But on the other one of the local users, we have a couple of users doing exactly that one.
Yeah, I think the right term is recommended practice.
Right, even better.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just a small piece of logging, but it can definitely help you a lot because I get quite often the request in the community about, hey, my device is just rebooted. Can I check what happened? Basically, since the logging is not activated by default, afterwards, no. But if you activate that feature, you would at least see if someone inside of the IGEL UMS sent out something to the endpoint. Could be a specific command like shutdown, could be a job, so a scheduled task or whatever, but that's something you would see mostly in the logging information.
Yeah,
cool. But it's really a cool one. We just covered it at the beginning, so I promised to come back to that configuration pending window. If you are using an older UMS, I can't tell you exactly when it happened, but let's say if you use a 603 or 50 something UMS, you will not have that feature. So you will have to update to 607, if I remember right, to get that specific view criteria. But just showing, so we have views. Views are dynamic filters showing something. Basically, you could do show me all devices that didn't boot it up in the last 30 days. Show me all devices that offline or online or whatever else, and combine that criteria. But since 1 or 2 versions of the UMS, we have now a specific view criteria, which is called configurations pending or configuration changes pending. So with that one, creating a view based on that, you will see all the devices in your complete UMS, if you didn't specify a subcriteria, which are holding that blue exclamation mark. So who are not having the last configuration set that you assigned to that endpoint. And that's extremely helpful, especially in 24/7 companies who are not rebooting the device every night, every morning, or who are not having standard office times where the device is at least shut down 1 time a day when the user is leaving the office. So having that kind of information is extremely helpful. And that's the view approach. You cannot do something with that, at least not directly, but it gives you a first approach about, hey, which kind of configuration is not hitting the device. Right.
That's great. That's the picture's worth 1,000 words, and being able to look at any point in time, is there something that's not landing would be extremely valuable. I'm definitely going to go watch and take that one away.
Cool. So just because you might also ask, hey, that's great to know which device didn't got the last configuration state. I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the Detective Tuesday, so I mentioned it here in the podcast. If you look at your UMS console and your device, you have on the right hand of your UMS console a tree. And in this tree, you see which profile is assigned to which level of your directory tree. And if your device is having that blue exclamation mark, you will definitely find on the right hand of that window a profile which is showing that little blue eye. And then you can go through and check, oh, that's the language keyboard layout US that didn't hit the device. I might have to reboot the device or maybe send the configuration right now. So just a small hint on that side might help you to find out exactly also which kind of configuration didn't hit the device. Right. So now we are covering a topic that Chris and you, Andy, and I discussed, I guess, last time or the time before, about what happens if you have multiple UMS server on your infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about like an HA or just like 2 separate environments?
Both of them. Basically, okay. You would like to know which UMS servers were deployed to your endpoint, if you speak about HA, or if you might have different ones because you have a prod and a test environment and you didn't split them from the network perspective, you would like to see, hey, which kind of UMS servers are known to that device and who are able to discuss new configurations with that endpoint. We have, like every time, the ability to right-click the endpoint in UMS, go to edit configuration, so opening the local configuration of the endpoint, and then going to system remote management. And there, having usually an incomplete IPv6 address and the IPv4 address of your UMS server or your UMS servers. That's the approach to check it from the UMS side, which might not reflect everything. And that's the reason why you can do exactly the same step, but also from the device in the graphical user interface in going to the IGEL setup. So we didn't mention it at the beginning, but if you are not having the IGEL setup in your taskbar, which would be our best practice to remove it, you can press usually Ctrl-Alt-S in the standard graphical user interface to open the local configuration setup on IGEL OS. And there, going to System, Remote Management again, and see from the endpoint perspective which UMS servers are available.
Okay. So let's go over recommended practice on that real quick. So you normally hide it through the UI, but there is a keyboard shortcut to get there. But you also probably preclude the normal user that logs in or the default login from being able to make settings changes, right? That's
exactly. We are removing it from the taskbar and usually from the start menu. We are adding an additional level of security in adding an administrator password to the endpoint by using a profile or a master profile. Yeah. That blocks the access to the standard user to the IGEL setup. Even if you would have hit Ctrl-Alt-S for which other reason, you would not be able to log in and change something locally. So yes, that's at least a best practice that I'm trying to share with my customers, removing the IGEL setup just to avoid some misconfigurations on the endpoint.
And we should probably do a talk on master profile setting and administrator password. That's something I think a lot of people skip, and probably step number one in most environments.
Agree.
Well, Seb, that's it, right? I mean, you've covered this. I encourage people to go out and watch the video. I'm going to go watch the video. I haven't watched it yet, but having you walk through that, I know for a fact that I've got a long history of doing Active Directory support. I worked at Microsoft for a couple of years, learned how to troubleshoot Active Directory policies being applied. I need to know how to do that in your world better. And what you've done here is magnificent because it gives me a quick, easy 10-minute and 30-second or 11-minute way of learning all I need to know, more or less. And that's awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. You're more than welcome. It was a pleasure.
Chris Feeney, we've kind of kept you quiet because we're on a mission to get through this, but any thoughts or questions?
Implies that I talk too much. So no, I was just letting the master run through that thing. No, I think did well. Appreciate it. And as also, as noted in the article, there are some great links to KB articles for additional information. So once again, Seb, thank you for putting this together. It's, I get comments from folks like, hey, why did this not get covered more detail in the certification? Well, there's only so much you can put into a certification course exam. That's why the power of the community is out there to help you with, these other things. So if you're not plugged into the community, get plugged in. You will learn a lot. And Seb is there, and so is Doug, to make sure that you learn a lot. So that's all I've got for now.
There's a whole world of people waiting to help you in the IGEL world. Which, if you had to ask me, IGEL versus Google Chrome OS related variants and Microsoft, I think one of the biggest things about the IGEL play, other than the security element of it being Linux to start with, is the community. You can make a lot of good decisions on technologies to pick based on what you hear and see, and can get support from the community. That just goes a long way.
Yeah, and one final thing. Just if you're not comfortable with Slack, maybe you've never used it before, just the archives.igelcommunity.com site is a great place to start. That's what we're looking at here, more or less. And start there, do some keyword searches, and then, that'll help you find stuff from a browser perspective. So here to help you as always. So with that, I'm good for the week, man. Thanks.
And we're all IT guys, and going out here and going to the archives and doing a search and finding the answer and being the hero. I'm using air quotes here, but the hero versus having to open a support ticket. That's what we live for.
Yeah. I think Jed talks about that, right? I mean, people prefer that self-service approach versus it's like a guy kind of pulling off to the side asking for directions, right?
Yeah, we were doing
against our nature.
My son and I were doing something the other day with our boat, and a guy comes up and offers to help, and I said no thanks, I got it. And my son, who obviously knows me way too well, says, "Dad, come on, take the help. Take the help. It's okay." That's not who I am. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Seb, anything else before we let you go?
No, we're fine. Thank you very much again for spreading that kind of information. And if you have topics that are not covered in the podcast, feel free to reach out to me or to us, and we will try to cover it in the Tech Tip Tuesday videos, in a podcast or whatever. Just feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to cover them.
So Seb, I'll give you a choice. You can either come to the IGEL XenTegra baseball game tomorrow night here in Charlotte, or you can get your LinkedIn profile done. Which one are you going to do?
Damn it. I would be so happy to take number 1, to be honest. But I guess I have to do number 2 first.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your week.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, guys. Take care.